This week we get to talk with Amanda Dean. Amanda was previously one of the leaders of SE3. I would still say she's a leader, but her involvement has changed to allow other people to take roles in the NCSEA management side. But you will hear all of the ways Amanda is participating and completely understands this data. And also, I bet most of the listeners here are white men. Do you know Zach and I are also? We see this industry different than other groups. This goes farther, but I just think we can do better and we're not quite at the level we should be. But let's just listen to the discussion and start to think about small improvements we can make.
The Structural Engineering Podcast.
I'm Amanda Dean. I am a professional engineer licensed in the states of Florida and Texas, and I am a studio practice leader at HKS in Houston.
Thank you very much for joining us, Amanda. We have talk about SE3 today, Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity, and I know that you help them out a lot. What is sort of position with that committee?
Yeah, it's a committee of NCSEA, the National Council of Structural Engineering Associations, and SE3 stands for Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity. My involvement with this committee, I am a past vice co-chair. What we had in the past, and we tend to do triads, is we had the chair, and the chair was Marcus Freeman from 2021 to 2024, something like that. And Marcus was the leader, and then Cambria Flowers and I couldn't agree on who got the distinction of being less important, so we decided to be co-important.
Sounds wonderful. Okay. Talking with Amanda later, she wanted to include the people that founded SE3 and put so much work into getting this started. I know on May 15th, they'll be celebrating 10 years of trying to make our profession better for everyone involved. The lead author was Angie Sommer. The 2015 to 2016 co-chairs and founders were Natalie Tse and Rose McClure. The 2016 to 2017 SE3 co-chairs were Angie Sommer and Nick Sharrow Groves. The graphic designer was Sienna Wilson. Take a look at their website below. I'll link everything I can here. So we have some questions on the SE3 surveys, and I will shorten structural engineering, equity, and engagement to just SE3, so everyone knows. But yeah, so we want to ask about sort of the surveys that you put together, and so maybe can you give us an overview of the SE3 surveys that go out and what it aims to measure and how the data is collected.
Yeah, happy to. So the SE3, Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity Committee, really is a survey committee at heart. We started with a survey in 2016 is when it was sent out, but it started being generated as an idea earlier than that. And the purpose is in the name, like a lot of things with structural engineering, right? So we're trying to measure and improve engagement and equity. So the first time we sent it out, it was 3 questions we were trying to answer. Are people in structural engineering generally engaged? Of the people who left the structural engineering profession, do they have characteristics in common? And do structural engineers' experiences vary by gender? So before I kind of go forward, I want to stop and think about what life was like between 2013 and 2016. It was a different lifetime, right?
Yeah.
It was before COVID. And I don't know how old a general listener might be on this podcast, but I graduated from school in 2003 and my undergraduate, and the landscape was very different back then. So architects and a couple of our peer organizations, ASCE, were looking at the profession with a gender lens. And when we started seeing those ideas, those results popping up, NCSEA, and in particular, the SEA of Northern California, particular San Francisco Bay Area, said, "Hey, we want to see about this information for us because there wasn't anything out there." So, going back to your question, what is the survey now, at least, and what it aims to measure is over the last 2 sets of surveys, 2018 and 2020, we've been cultivating and re-questioning what the survey should be, but at the core, who's here? Do they like being here? Who left? And why did they leave? And how do we keep people here once they're here?
How would you say has the survey evolved over the years, and what changes have you made to improve it?
Well, so the survey is it's almost a living, breathing event more than a document. We put the survey together as a group at NCSEA, and then then we bring in a survey consultant who really knows how to make this survey work. We're structural engineers. We don't want to stray too far out of our comfort zone because we're not going to make a good survey. We're going to make a great structure. We're not going to make a great survey. And so a lot of the work goes into the wording and the questions themselves, right? Are we asking the right questions based on the data we got in the past? Then we want to do some beta surveys to make sure that the people who are taking the survey are from a diverse group of people. It's a small group, less than 50. And then when they answer the questions, are the answers making sense, right? So if I take a beta test and I say, I have kids, and the next question says, okay, since you don't have kids, how do you spend your time or something like that? Clearly, we didn't put the survey together right. So the way it's evolved is the 2016 survey, like I said, had just the questions about age, gender, position, parental status, and geographic location. Based on the data that we received, we noticed that not just with the survey data, but when we had conversations with people about that data, racial identity and sexual orientation were playing a role on the engagement and equity of this profession, but it wasn't being included in our survey. So 2018 added those two additional demographic areas. So, like I said, it's more of an event of a conversation than just a survey that gets sent back. And we had, I think, between 2016 and 2018, maybe 70 to 80 events where we took the data out, talked about it, presented it, got feedback, and tried to refine what our questions were so we could get better data. We're all about the data. So 2020, which ended up being a little ironic, we talked about career development, compensation, because that's always number one, overall retention, and work flexibility. So we put together the survey, and then again, COVID hit. So it's it's always changing. It's always evolving. Um, but I think one of the big things that we added in 2020 was a call to action, which NCSEA joined with CASE and SEI to use the information that we've been gathering, say these are the items that are hindering our ability to be the best in our field and keep the best in our field. And we are committed to changing it. We don't know how we're going to change it necessarily, but we know that these are things that need to change in order to keep the best and brightest.
That's excellent. So I know the structural engineering community is not massive, but how many people do you get to respond to the survey at this point?
So in 2016, we started with about 2,000 responses, 2015 responses, and they were mostly from California. Again, it started in California. Then 2018, we bumped up to 2,000 and closer to 3,000. 2018, we got close to 3,000 responses, and a quarter from California. Then in 2020, we got 5,000 responses from all 50. Yeah, and it was from all 50 states.
That's exciting. For someone, okay, so when does the survey come out? Sorry, these are very specific survey questions, but if someone's interested in filling this out and sharing their opinion, is this every year it comes out and it's in an NCSEA email that we get? Where would they come across it?
So unfortunately, we are volunteers. And being volunteers means that we have a lot of other priorities, but 2020 really disrupted everything. So we were planning on doing 2-year cycles, and that got disrupted. So now that we're in 2025, we're getting back into sending it out on a more regular basis, probably every 2 to 3 years. I don't know exactly. And then the deployment method is going to be multifaceted. It's going to be an NCSCA email. It's going to be an email from your local SCA. It's going to be on LinkedIn. It's going to be in any sort of social media. It's going to be word of mouth. Since I know you now, I'm going to send you an email.
I'm perfect. Well, and another question on, so you had mentioned engagement earlier, right? That you are measuring an engagement, and I'm thinking about a lot of numbers in this case, like days off, a salary. These are all just numbers. Engagement. How do you sort of put a value to that?
So, for the purpose of this study, engagement is defined to be the degree to which engineers are satisfied with their profession, both on a daily basis and throughout their career, and the corollary desire to continue working as a structural engineer.
Okay.
Would you like some examples?
Yes, I would actually.
Excellent. So, recruitment and retention, we were able to survey how many people have considered leaving the profession. You're not engaged if you're considering leaving the profession.
That's true.
And it turns out pretty much every time we send out the survey, about 55 to 60% of respondents have thought about leaving the profession at one
Really?
time or another. Yeah, it's not great, Max. It's
That
not
makes me
great.
sad for the profession. I that's a much bigger number than I was expecting.
Yeah, and I am I know what I'm passionate about in life, and it's recruitment and retention and structural engineering. Actually, in the AEC profession, I don't really limit it to structural engineering. I taught at architecture school for a while. I'm a people leader, I'm a studio practice leader, and nothing makes my day harder than when somebody says they're thinking about leaving.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
hard. But I know that I've kept people in this profession as a professor, as a peer, as someone who is a leader. So it's possible. And so we're just going to figure out ways to make that happen and share that with other people so that more people can do it.
If our profession has sort of grown to keep pace with the population growth, like is it growing slower than other population and
Mhm.
other work platforms? Are there more structural engineers now? I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but
I think what you're trying to ask is the population of structural engineers in the general population of the United States, at least, percentage wise, keeping is it keeping pace? So if we were 10% of the
exactly, yeah.
population in 1920, are we the 10% of the population in 2020? And yes and no.
Mm,
So I really only have 28 years of data. This is something that I do in my spare time. And I don't know if this is for the podcast or if it's just between you and me. So in my spare time, I go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I'm not kidding. This is literally what I do
yeah.
in my spare time. And I try to track data and parse out data as best I can because structural engineers are not tracked individually. We are put as civil
It's
engineers
civil,
with,
yeah.
yep. And so, and I apologize because I focus mostly on women in structural engineering because that's where I have the most pull and it's my own personal experience, so I can speak to it better. We civil engineers have stayed about 16 to 18% of the population for less of the engineering profession for the last 20 years. We have not increased or decreased. And that
Okay.
sucks because I know that women have become a larger part of the workforce.
Yeah,
So I think we're stagnant as a profession, to be honest.
I agree. I have a quick note. When Zach asked this question, it sounds like we were just laughing. Well, we were, of course. We make sure each episode is as close to a real conversation as we can get it. In real life, we talked to a man about this topic and made our way to talking about kids, etc., etc. That part you don't really want to hear. But if it sounds like we were just laughing after this sort of serious topic, we were. So uh, let's just skip to the next.
What are some of the most surprising findings from the survey or items that are average structural engineers, really should be aware of?
You know, I'm going to talk about the most recent survey because the 2016, 2018, kind of the trends that we're starting to see, it's useful, but as engineers and a lot of people know, 3 points isn't really enough data. Can't start making significant amounts of decisions, and you can't really pull a lot from that. But that being said, 5,000 people responding to the 2020 survey, we do have enough information to start pulling significant findings. Um, we really put together our findings into 6 buckets. One is recruitment and retention. The second one I would say is career aspirations. Third is discrimination and harassment. The fourth is workplace flexibility. And the fifth, performance and feedback. And the sixth and final one is children independent care. So I'm going to just touch on a few of the highlights from each of those buckets if you don't mind. So with recruitment and retention, which I put first because it's my passion, like I mentioned earlier, 55% of survey respondents have considered leaving the profession in 2020. So that was surprising. I I don't know if the rest are necessarily surprising to a structural engineer, but it's useful to point out these findings in order to help people feel that there's some correlation with what they're feeling in the profession. Work-life balance and less stress are the most highly rated reasons for considering leaving. Again, I don't have answers to these questions, but we have data that allows us to really just verify what we're experiencing. This one, I'll dive into discrimination and harassment a little bit later. I think it's the hardest one to talk about because it's uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, of course, they're less likely to talk about it. But the data shows that when given a hypothetical situation, discrimination and harassment is not going to contribute to a person's decision to leave the profession.
Really?
However, we do have survey respondents, yeah, who left the profession. And of the survey respondents who left the profession, over 75% cited discrimination and harassment as a very much a reason for leaving. So I've thought about that one a lot, to be honest. I'm not, I'm going to try to refrain from interpreting the data as much as possible, but what that says to me is that a lot of people are not discriminated and harassed in this profession, and we'll talk about that more later. But when it happens, people leave.
Yeah.
It it could be the straw that broke the camel's back. It could be any number of reasons, but that one was really disheartening for me in particular.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a really hard one.
exactly, exactly. I'm glad we have that information at least. So the few times that we need to talk about it, it's there. Um, Let me move on to career aspirations. That's a little bit more uplifting.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, again, we're looking at gender and race and these demographics, but women are less likely than men to aspire to be a principal. You know, a lot of our respondents are at larger firms, but it seems like there's a lot of people in this profession. I believe it's about 50% of the profession. I will look back and double check, but there's a lot of people in our profession who don't feel like they need to be in charge of a company in order to be happy. There's lots of ways to be happy as a structural engineer. Again, we're looking at demographic data, so that's really going to be the lens at which I share this information with you. One that kind of is across the board is people with mentors are more likely to be satisfied with their career advancement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Uh,
Yeah.
72% of respondents with mentors are satisfied as opposed to 55% with no mentors saying they're satisfied. So if you're looking to make your workplace happier, mentorship is huge.
Interesting. My company does the mentorship position, and I really enjoy it. Like I have a mentor, and it's a just sort of an aside from normal work discussion about work at a larger scale, and I really enjoy it. So I understand.
You know, I've I've heard that architects are an apprenticeship, and that, of course, implies a mentor. And we're not architects, but I think that, of course, we're very closely tied. So that that's something that we should think about. All right, getting into discrimination harassment highlights. It's no surprise, but women and minority racial groups are significantly more likely than white men to experience discrimination and harassment, but we're up to 19 times more likely to experience it.
Wow, that's a massive number.
It's, yes,
Yeah.
massive. Um, and again, we don't want to look at it because it's uncomfortable, but if we ignore this, it means that we're not serving a group of our population. There's there's a reason that we have this data. We didn't collect the data to make people comfortable or uncomfortable. We really have just one goal in mind, It's to make the structural engineering profession better. And the way we're better is that the best and the brightest of us never have to leave if they don't want to for personal goals or anything under the sun except for our workplace. Our workplace should not be the reason we leave. Because think about how hard it is to be a structural engineer. You have to get through your undergraduate, then potentially you have to get through your graduate. Some of us choose research, some of us go on to be PhDs. And then once you get into this profession, depending on what particular field of interest you have, I've always said I love capital B buildings. I want to see great design.
Mhm.
And that that can be a real cutthroat profession. So we all have dreams. We all have really strong reasons why we're here. We've already worked really hard to be here. I don't want there to be anything standing in the way of people staying here for their entire career.
Yeah.
So again, sticking with discrimination and harassment, only 23% of those who have experienced discrimination and harassment report it. And when they do, only 44% report seeing any results or actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you share the video, but I'm seeing your faces and I'm like, I am so sorry to be the one sharing this information.
Luckily, we don't share the video, so yeah.
Um, yeah. And respondents who experience discrimination and harassment report lower satisfaction and are 20% more likely to consider leaving. So overall, I think really what we need to know is that it's happening and we can't turn a blind eye to it because we're losing good people. Moving on to workplace flexibility. The crazy thing about this is that we added workplace flexibility in 2020, sent out the survey, and then COVID hit. We sent it out in March of 2020.
There was a big change, so it's good timing.
Was there? Do tell me about it. So during COVID, 46% of respondents told us that working remotely improved. I would say 100% of people saw an improvement in workplace flexibility, but that's not what the results say. But before COVID, the majority of respondents reported rarely or never working from home. And again, it changed, but during the survey, 59% of our respondents were either satisfied or very satisfied with work-life balance. So that's really interesting. About 60% of us are happy with our work-life balance, but about 60% of us think about leaving.
Oh gosh.
People are complex.
Yeah, the overlap there is confusing, but
It's confusing. Fifth one, performance feedback. So what this part talks about is, do people want to hear how they're doing or do they not? And I think you know the answer to this. People want to know how they're doing at work. It turns out that there are some differences when it comes to demographics as to how people receive feedback and how often they receive feedback. So non-white respondents and respondents with less than 5 years of experience are less satisfied with the frequency of feedback they get. Again, these are data points, but I think it's important for us to understand that they exist.
is there would they like more, or is that not a point of a question of the survey, like more or less?
They would like more feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely. White respondents are more likely to receive positive performance reviews. I'm not saying why because I do not know why, but that is something that happens in our profession. It's something we need to think about. I think the future surveys, we can try to dig into the why a little bit more, but at least we have the information that there's a discrepancy in how different demographics receive feedback. And that's something that we need to address. I'm going to tell you the next one, recognizing that you are both white men, but white men respondents are the most likely demographic group to rate themselves as having better performance than their peers.
Yep.
Again,
That's
just a data point. My husband is the structural engineer and he's a white man and you know, So we've been actually this weekend will be 18 years of marriage. So I, I may have told him that a couple of times too.
That is fair.
Last one, children and dependent care, the highlights. So this is what I think is really interesting. And Zach, you're going to find really relevant with your 8-week-old. Um, Across the board, and I will tell you more about this later, but over time, structural engineers who have children are happier than structural engineers without children, according to our data.
So,
I know it doesn't necessarily make sense or start off as an obvious conclusion, but it's true.
yeah.
I like that a lot. I was actually talking to a colleague the other day, and he was talking about the happiness he has designing schools that his kids have gone to. And I was like, man, I can see that correlation of your work and your family and the ties of that. So I could see some pieces of that for sure.
I I hope that happens. My kids are thoroughly unimpressed with the buildings that me and my husband designed. Um, so I think the biggest thing here, and again, this data is from 2020, so I'm sure it's changed, but only 4% of respondents felt their employers are supportive of employees with dependents. So we're looking 4%. We're
Wow.
looking at the biggest data point we have here. It's almost across the board. Everyone thinks that the structural engineering profession does not do a good job of supporting structural engineers with dependents. Full stop. That is as much of a fact as we can find from this data.
That's a pretty strong data point. I mean, that's almost everyone said they're not supportive.
Let's be honest, the structural engineers and people who use data to make decisions, we would say that's good. We would say that's 100%. I wouldn't redesign that footing if it was 96%.
Yeah. Wow.
There's a mom's penalty and a dad's bonus for having children. So there does, according to the data, there appears to be an increase in salary immediately after having children if you're a man, and there appears to be a decrease in salary compared to your peers immediately after having children if you're a woman. We had we had 9 non-binary responses, but there's such a small group of data that it became a little too hard to identify who was who with that data, so we had to take that data out. So again, there appears to be a gender difference with this data. So Zach, there's still time for you to take this following data point to heart. 87% of women report providing 50% or more care to their dependents compared to 42% of men. Essentially, what we're seeing there is that of the structural engineers who have dependents, almost 90% of the women feel that they are doing more care than their spouse if their spouse is a man. And then only 42% of men feel that they're providing 50% or more of the care at home. I don't want to start any fights with married couples because
Zach, it's time to do
I'm
more.
Hey, I
I
try my
might
best.
say.
Emerson just really needs his mother,
oh, I don't know how to get out of this gracefully. I'm just going to move on. There's no real good segue here.
Yep.
um, just a couple more. Again, I apologize. I have 22 pages notes, but a couple more things I want to throw at you that I thought were interesting. Women and non-white respondents advance to senior positions faster than men and white respondents. Huh, right? Um, I've seen that in other data analysis pools that I've looked at for this profession, and there's probably a lot of reasons that happens. A bit of a more intense weeding out process along the way. Stagnation at certain points. The lowest percentage of women and minorities is at the C-suite level. Um, so, really, what happens a lot of the times in a company is that the first two levels of progression to, EIT2 and engineer, for example, are automatic. If you're there for 2 years, you can be EIT2, et cetera. As soon as you get your PE, you advance to engineer. So those don't have any sort of input. But the rest of the advancements tend to be based on networking and your social status in a firm. Apologies if there's anyone disagrees with me on that. But it it does seem to be the point where women and minorities can move a little bit faster until you get to that C-suite role, and then that drops dramatically.
I
Another
wonder
interesting point.
why the C-suite
Yeah,
is sort of the line that data doesn't follow anymore.
I've given this a lot of thought. Again, it's not part of the report, so this is just, Amanda's personal view. But of course, women and minorities have been part of the profession for less time. So I like to joke that women were invented in 1980. But there's been less time for people to move up. In order to get a promotion, you need an advocate, I guess is what I was kind of getting at. And there's something called confirmation bias. People really like to promote people that look like them. I'm guilty of it too. It's just a natural tendency. And so I just think it's a mix of lack of candidates and bias that's gone unchallenged that luckily we're starting to talk about more. Another thing I want to share, managers and staff have different perceptions of the work environment. So what I mean by that is that if you look at the differences in data across demographics, across any sort of identifier, people who have the biggest discrepancy in their perception of the workplace are managers and non-managers.
Hmm.
And so what that says to me is if you're a manager, the workplace is not being experienced by your staff the way you think it is.
Yeah, I would believe that one. I think, yeah, you have a different. I don't know how to phrase anything today. I completely believe that, though.
Um, I'll try to give you, I'll try to slow down a bit. So the people who are least satisfied with their work-life balance are people at middle management. I don't think that that's just a structural engineering trope. I think that's the case everywhere. Um, Sorry to giggle if for reasons you
No,
don't
it
know.
sounds like an office space sort of a. I believe it.
And then I think the last one I'll share on this question is the amount of hours worked in a week has an impact on an employee's perception of the work-life balance. And people who work over 50 hours are not the least satisfied. It's people who work 45 to 50 hours a week who are the least satisfied at work. So 40 to 45 are happier, 50 plus are happier. It's at 45 to 50 where people really are unhappy at work.
Interesting. Yeah,
I, it's just an
that,
interesting,
that's
all
a
of these
hard
are
one to put a
interesting.
reasoning, any logic to. It's just what the numbers say.
Max, what's
And we
going to
all have
happen
our,
is a bunch of managers are going to listen to our podcast and go, "Oh, okay,
We're
I'm
working
I'm
50
I'm
hour
not
weeks.
working them enough. All right, 50 plus, here we go. You guys are supposed to be happy. You're working more. That's what I was told."
I think that what I'm trying to say, Zach, is that if you look at the data and you look at the follow-up questions, because I'm giving you a snapshot of dozens, if not hundreds of pages of pamphlets and some bite-sized information that we've put out there, I think what I'm trying to say is that people who have autonomy over their schedule are happier. And so people who are working 50 plus are often doing that because they're at a principal or a partner level and they're really engaged in their work and they're finding it really rewarding. And so they're putting in that time because that really brings them joy. That middle manager level tends to be the group that's lumped into that 45 to 50 and they're already unhappy. So we might need to decouple the data.
Yeah. So I'm really curious from you and your personal career and being a practice leader, what were the maybe the top 3 things that you took from this data that you have implemented or changed yourself that you would suggest to others to think more critically about when managing and leading people?
I wouldn't say that I'm a typical manager in that I've been involved in SE3 and other groups that track work-life balance for a very long time. Actually, I think the first time I was involved in curating a panel on work-life balance was 2018. So this is something that I've thought about a lot, where this might be new information for a lot of people. I love this. I dive into it in my free time. This is really my happy place. So I'll answer your question by saying that the things that I implement with my team are really, I model that work life balance is real. It's one thing to say, oh, don't work too much overtime, make sure you go home. I make sure that my team understands why I'm not available on Teams or I'm not at my desk. I try to model behavior that my team will follow. So if I'm leaving work 2 hours early, like I did on Friday because my daughter has a dance, I say, I'm going to leave work early on Friday because my daughter has a dance and I want to help her get ready. And those are really important moments to me because she's 11 now and she's not going to be 11 and a fifth grader and getting ready for the fifth grade dance ever again. Um, and really, what I've found from that is that when my team feels enabled and encouraged to take care of their life when it comes up, I get out of them more than I would if I was forcing them to be at their desk during a certain amount of time. So I'm really a big proponent of workplace flexibility, which you find from the answers of our survey is one of the top indicators of workplace satisfaction. So modeling workplace flexibility is really my top takeaway from this that any manager should be implementing in their workplace. Mentorship is something that comes naturally to some and not so much to others, but it's a priority and it's a learned skill. I mentor, and I have always mentored. I mentored when I was a professor, I mentor as a people leader at HKS. I mentor in SE3. The current leadership, you asked me earlier, the current leadership of SE3 is Stephanie, Lisa, and Priscilla. They're energetic, they are incredibly intelligent, organized women. I could talk about them forever, but they're new to this role. I was in that role for 3 years. I have left leadership officially, but I make sure that I'm available to them and I reach out every once in a while to see how they're doing. That's what mentorship can look like. Just checking in on people who came after you to make sure that they understand the ropes. And if they know that there's that constant touch point, there's no real pressure for them to make something scheduled and official. It's, hey, Amanda's probably going to reach out to me soon. Next time we talk, I'm going to ask her about this. That mentorship is really easy to implement for me. It might not be for others, but it's so critical in making sure that the people come after you have a pathway and want to stay. I always stayed away from the architecture profession because I do not like the idea of subjective. I don't want anybody to tell me my design is bad or good. I want to make things stand up. That is a verifiable fact. The idea that there's anything that we do as structural engineers is good or not good, it just doesn't fit for us. So I really want to decouple, and this was the hardest thing I had to do. I had to decouple being a good person from being a good leader. I would say that anyone who's a leader is probably a good person in this industry. I mean, I'm not going to pass judgment on how people live their lives, but one on one, everyone that I've met, they're good people. But that doesn't make them a good leader. We have data that shows that demographics are important to how we lead our structural engineers. And so, even though it's uncomfortable, and even though it may not fit with how we've lived our life and how we've interacted with others, There are demographic differences on how people perceive the structural engineering profession. There's demographic differences on how we feel treated while we're in the structural engineering profession. And there's demographic differences on how we treat each other in the profession. And none of us mean to do it, but it does happen. So not looking at it doesn't do us any favors. It's hard. We need to look at the data.
Something I've always found really interesting, and I'm curious what your how you might share some knowledge to the audience. I think often, from at least my experience, what I've seen is you get really good engineers and they get promoted to a manager role, right? And we're all very good at engineering. We go to school, we get trained on it, but then all of a sudden one day you're told you're so good at this. You know what? You should manage people, and you should be in charge of people now. Um, what would be your advice for that person that's really good at engineering now told to lead people? Um, what would you say to them?
So interesting that you ask about managers and management training, because the number one best practice that came out of our 2016 survey is that managers need business and management training. A lot of survey respondents felt that they were not being managed effectively. One of those examples is that there was a general feeling of misalignment with the assignments and the goals of the company or the goals of the organization. So if you're a young engineer and you're working on project X, um, and a project, I mean, sorry, if you're a young engineer and you're working on something that doesn't fit into your overall scope or understanding of an organization, you're going to get unmotivated, demotivated. So what happens during management training a lot of times is that you're taught how to talk to the why of a task. I just went through some management training today, actually, so I'm going to pull from that. Um, there's a famous TED Talk. It's the most watched TED Talk, and they talk about the why. And I apologize for not knowing this gentleman's name.
It's Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks, Max.
And we'll put the link in the show notes. I want to
Please,
watch this again. Yeah.
you should. So, a great engineer does not make a great manager. That's exactly what this data is telling us. And as people who are really motivated by facts and are people who are motivated by data, we have the data to show that. So, aligning daily tasks with the employee's goals creates workplace satisfaction. Mentoring creates workplace satisfaction. So, curbing the culture of long hours and instead focusing on development of tools and talents and explaining to them how that fits into the overall picture of someone's firm, that's going to increase workplace satisfaction. So, these sound like really obvious things that you can implement in a workplace, but they're not. This just doesn't seem to be something that the structural engineering profession gravitates towards naturally. And I think to the idea that structural engineers as managers don't feel that they need management training, it, it's almost think about it the other way around. We don't hire managers who aren't structural engineers overwhelmingly in this profession. So you wouldn't ask a manager to do structural engineering. And I can hear the feedback and the pushback. Oh, but we have to get licensed. Da 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 da. Da. It's still an area of study. It's still something you can learn. And the structural engineering profession is full of very smart, motivated people. I know that all of us can learn management. We just need to put in the effort. In addition to doing the survey, we do literature reviews because we're not doing this work in a bubble, and it's really important to make sure that we see what our peers are doing. So one of the one of our peer reviews showed that principals and owners are less likely than all of their staff to believe that formal business management training is important. This is in stark contrast to a study that we can put in the notes that 98% of managers in the United States feel that more management training is needed in their firms.
Interesting. I wonder why those conflict.
Well, and in the same study, 87% wish they'd received more training before assuming their current role. So this is for the general working public. So what's really interesting is the structural engineers seem to be the only people who don't think we need management training in order to be managers.
I imagine we're not magically good at it, and that's why.
Your words. I don't know what to say about that.
I have a question that's, I mean, very similar or on the same ballpark. Any How does the SE3 survey compare to other industry surveys? Like, I know you're talking about the general public here, but are there other close industries that have similar surveys and are getting similar data, or are we different in many parts? I guess maybe architecture would be a good sort of
I,
comparison.
looking at the SEI survey from 2013, there was a lot of similarities. So we are seeing similarities in the data from SEI, who is, Structural Engineering Institute. ASME and ASCE had a survey around the same time that had similar results. And I have to say, SEA of Northern California is continuing to dig into their work and going further with this than the National Council of Structural Engineering Associations is. So they have the most prolific pieces of work out there. And I'm going to give a shout out to Priscilla Wynn, who is one of the current leaders, SE3, and she is leading our SE3 survey group. We break into smaller groups, even though we are just a committee in our own. Priscilla has close to a decade of experience working on surveys specifically in the structural engineering profession. And she is an incredible leader in survey development for structural engineers in particular. And with her leadership, she's helping us really dig deep into the whys and uncover demographic differences in structural engineering that can help us make smart decisions about recruiting and retention, and even going as far as to reach out to individual universities in California when she was in California to get responses from students so that we had firsthand accounts of how they're perceiving the structural engineering profession while they're still in school. I mean, this is some in-depth data that we're trying to find. That being said, those peers of ours, we're all finding similar findings. The one thing that I personally would love to see, and it's a bit of an obsession of mine, is I really want to see demographic data for the PE-SE exam. There is bias in test taking. It's been verified countless times. So we don't have the data to tell us anything about who's taking the exam, who's passing, who's failing, who's taking it multiple times. We don't know if there is a problem or not because we don't have the data to tell us. 76% of people who responded to our survey, men are more likely to be PEs than women, but we don't know why. And I want to know, are women passing the exam at a higher rate and less are taking it? Are men passing at a higher rate? Are there any things that we can do, again, to keep people in this profession? Because we all know personally how absolutely heartbreaking it can be to not do our personal best at something like a PE or an SE exam. It defines who we are. I'm Amanda Dean PE, and there's nothing you can do to make me stop wanting to keep those letters after my name. So what about those people who are taking the exam and there is a barrier that we can remove? Why on earth wouldn't we remove it?
So what question or questions have we not asked yet that you think would be beneficial to have answered for the audience about SE3 in the survey?
Oh, great question. One of the things that I think we're starting to see as a potential question is funding, meaning scholarships. How many people are in structural engineering only because a scholarship was provided to keep them in the profession? I know personally, this is where I want it to be. It's a great fit for who I am as a person and my interests. But if I didn't have scholarships for my entire undergraduate and graduate education, I wouldn't be here today because I wouldn't have been able to make it. So how are people funded is really important to me. I think data on universities and hiring is very important because once you get through that education stage, is there a gap between these talented people who are trained and ready to get in the profession and the hiring networks that are looking for people? Are we missing an opportunity here that we could easily fix? I think another really important thing is to reach out to people who leave the profession. I'm not entirely sure how we would do that, but until we have more information from the people who left, we don't know what the main reasons for people leaving are, and we can't address them. And the last thing is, I would really like to take a Freakonomics or Malcolm Gladwell approach to the data. I would love to see if we can tie anything else to success in this field than what we're already looking at. One of my favorite questions is, what was your favorite book as a child? I had a friend who really loved a book about trains, and now he's an urban planner. Personally, my favorite book was Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if there's any correlation. I mean, does every structural engineer love Alice in Wonderland? Maybe. I don't know. Another great question is, did you watch The X-Files? I don't know if you've ever heard of the Scully effect, but there's actually a direct correlation between women who go into STEM fields and women who watched The X-Files. It is scientifically
That's
proven.
very cool.
And I loved The X-Files, and now I'm an engineer. I mean, but without getting too ridiculous, are there any magic bullets out there that we can use to create more structural engineers?
Henry Petrosky
I would
writing
love to
a
find
kid's
them.
book.
So yeah, I love surveys. I love going through the data, finding new correlations, building on it. And honestly, my absolute wish is to find those kind of magic potions. What can we put together into the general population that all of a sudden makes structural engineering the hot career? And we've got more people here than we could ever know what to do with. Ugh, that's the dream.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that is, if you ever find that out, let us know. Max and I would love to help. We think this is also the coolest thing ever. So, well, with that, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we love talking with you, and excited to see where things go with the survey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I had a really great time. I'm going to talk to you guys again soon, whether you want me to or not.
Deal.
Sounds wonderful.
The Structural Engineering Podcast.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.